Ark Survival Evolved is a game known for taming, and it definitely does have a lot of creatures, but herbivores and carnivores never really get talked about separately. So here are the 5 best Ark carnivores. Also, before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe as it helps the channel. So, in at number 5 is the Allosaurus. Now personally, I do think this is a really underrated carnivore that many more Ark players should utilize, as it is quite a simple tame if you come prepared, and considering they spawn in packs, they're not that hard to find, and you can tame a couple of them on your first go. These things will spawn in any mountainous region of pretty much any map. The islands, you can find them all across the north areas of the map. And the reason why you'd want to tame a pack is you will get a pack buff. Not all creatures have a pack buff, but the Allosauruses do benefit from this, and there will be a leader of the pack, which will be the highest level Allosaurus, and that is going to be the creature providing the bonuses to all the others. But the alpha of the pack can change. If a creature gains to a higher level than the current alpha in a pack, the pack will shift. So if you are riding an Allosaurus in your pack of Allosauruses, always make sure to look for the orangey glow coming out of the Allosaurus, and if it switches to the one that you're not riding on, switch to the new alpha, as you should really have control of the pack benefits. Also, on top of that, their saddles are unlocked quite early on compared to something like a Rex, a Spino, a Giga, or a Carnivores. So these things are quite accessible in the earlier stages of the game, and these are also great for doing bosses. Yes, something like a Rex is going to get you much further, as they have a lot more health than the Allosaurus, but the Allosaurus's damage stat really does stack up for boss fights, and if you have quite a few of these things, probably about 5, 10, maybe 15, you'll be able to get through quite a lot of bosses with absolute ease. But maybe don't go for alphas with this thing, especially not the alpha dragon on the island, as it probably won't go so well. Either way, once you have actually reached a player level to defeat the alpha bosses on Ark, you're probably going to have upgraded your carnivore. So overall, the Allosaurus is a great mid-game Ark tame. In at number 4 is the Rex. Now this is definitely one of the most popular creatures in Ark, but in my opinion it isn't the best carnivore for you to have. Definitely in your top 5, as this will get you through pretty much every boss with ease, apart from the Moder and probably the Alpha Dragon, as these things aren't the greatest at swimming and they'll probably drown underwater anyway, and for the Dragon it has a very unfair buff against carnivores, so for that I would use a Therizino instead of a Rex. But either way, the Rex has a great balance of health to melee damage. Now notice that I said balance of health and melee damage instead of it deals the most melee damage and it has the most health. Because in Ark that is simply not true. And what you really want in a boss creature is a great balance of health to melee damage and a creature that is still capable of actually fighting. The thing about the Rex is it has a great melee stat, but also on top of that it has a really solid health stat, which actually allows it to survive through boss fights. With something like the Allo, for some of the longer boss fights, it simply can't go all the way, as it doesn't have a very good health stat compared to something like the Rex. That is why the Rex is higher on the list, because yes, their melee damage is comparable, and with Allo pack buffs, the Allo's melee damage might even be a bit higher than the Rex's, but the Rex's health is just so far superior from the Allo that it really makes it a lot better. Now this may be a controversial opinion, but in at number 3 is the Yeti. Now I really think this is a lot better than the Rex, as it is a lot more useful in some cases than a Rex in a thing like a boss fight, or just in general, as I find Rexes are a bit clumsy, whereas the Yeti doesn't get stuck on literally everything that Ark has to offer, and the Yeti still has a great health stat with reasonable damage, and if you have a pack of Carnos, you can command them with your UT, and it is really a great creature for just getting things done. Whereas a Rex, in my opinion, is just too slow and too clumsy, and personally, I just get really bored. Now, yes, would a Rex do a better job? Yes, but the UT is so much more versatile than that. And also, on top of that, it has its 2 iconic roars. It has a Fear Roar, which will debuff the enemy creature, and a Courage Roar, which will buff your creatures, and also still debuff the enemy. Now, it is definitely a pain when a UT Fear Roars, and then you're on your creature, and then you've completely lost control of it. Which is also why this is a great creature to have in a PvP scenario. As if someone is trying to raid your base, if they're on something like a Pteranodon, which is quite common for PvP, you can simply Fear Roll them, and they are gone. Right, now into something a bit less controversial. In at number 2 is obviously the Giga. It wouldn't be a top 5 carnivores list without putting this thing here. It is such a great carnivore for a lot of things in Ark. I wouldn't use it to go resource gathering, as its stamina stat is absolutely atrocious, but it has 2 uses in my opinion, which really do make it a great carnivore that every Ark player should have. And both of these uses do come on Extinction. I don't really tend to use it on any other map apart from it. The thing is, with Gigas, they are great for doing OSDs on Extinction, which is just great for getting loot in general. If you didn't know what an OSD is, it is an orbital supply drop. So it's essentially a supply drop where you have to battle through waves of creatures, and then at the end of it, if you did protect the supply drop from all of the creatures, you will get the amazing loot out of that thing. Also, on top of that, on Extinction, it is great for doing any of the bosses and the Alpha King Titan at the end. Yes, you can use something like a Mega Mech, but that isn't a carnivore, so it wouldn't be on this list anyway. Or you could use Titans, but still the Giga is really the way to go. But also, if you are trying to kill Titans with this thing, you are going to need a lot more than 1 Giga. But luckily, they are great for breeding, and a great mutated bred Giga is absolutely insane compared to one that you have just tamed from the wild. This will take ages though on official settings, as it takes a week to raise a Giga, which is far too long, so don't do that. Now finally, in at number 1 is the Argentavis. This thing may be controversial as well, as you may prefer the Giga over it, or you don't have experience with this creature yet, as it is still a very recent addition to Ark. But I still think it really does deserve this number 1 spot, because it does everything a Giga can, but all the things that I hated about the Giga are now gone about this thing. For versatility, I would still prefer a UT. This thing is still a bit clunky, and will get stuck on a lot of Ark's resources, like rocks and trees, and yeah, it's hell with some big creatures. But still, unlike the Giga, this thing actually has a reasonable stamina stat, and you know, you might want to actually put a few levels into this thing as well, because it isn't great at base, but if you put about 5-10 levels into this thing, maybe 20, this thing is actually really good for traveling. But obviously, you're not just going to want to level stamina on this thing. You're not trying to create a stamina beast out of the Argentavis. You're trying to make a great battle creature, which is also why I would definitely use it for OSDs on Extinction, and also Titans on Extinction as well. This has sort of replaced Gigas for me. I kind of tend to use a mix of the both. I'll be on a Argentavis myself, but I will have a few Gigas as well. The only thing that really holds this back is its taming method is a little bit awkward compared to the Giga. Ark Survival Evolved is a game definitely known for its taming aspects and all of its creatures, but some of those creatures aren't as good as others. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you Ark's top 5 most useful tames that you will ever encounter. But just before we get into it, make sure to like and subscribe, as it really... In at number 5 is the Theri. Now, the reason why this creature is simply so useful is it is so versatile in its harvesting capabilities, and is also a great boss creature as well. If we want to talk about its harvesting first, it is an insane gatherer of berries, fiber, woods, and thatch. And if you know any Ark player, or even yourself, you will know that you go through a lot of fiber, and it is great to have a creature that can gather a lot of it, so you don't have to go out by yourself and just use a sickle on absolutely every bush that you can see in front of you. Also, on top of that, like I just mentioned, it is an absolutely amazing boss creature, namely for the dragon, as its fire buff will deal an insane amount of damage to carnivores, but luckily not herbivores, so for that the Theri is the way to go. But it can actually be useful for other bosses as well, as it has a reasonably good health stat and it deals a quite good amount of melee damage. Also, on top of that, it is just a great combat creature for general use on Ark as well. I don't usually use this thing for boss fights, unless I'm doing the dragon, obviously. But it is great for getting every Ark mundane task done. And it is really useful to have this creature as sort of the backbone of just my general Ark playing. In at number 4 is the Thyla. Now these things are definitely a very useful travel mount, and you can still use them for bosses as well, as they have a really good melee stat. They are a bit lacking on health, but if you give it a few levels and you have high level ones to start off with, they'll be alright for some gamma and beta options. But most people aren't using Thylas for bosses, they are using Thylas for their insane travelling capabilities and even some PvP raiding strategies, as they have the ability to climb up walls and vertical surfaces. Now as you can see here, the Thyla is insanely fast. Yes, I do have some extra speed put on here, but even a normal speed one is still insanely fast. And if you wanted to, you could pump a few levels into movement speed, making this thing even faster. But obviously the main reason why it is so good for traveling and also so good for PvP is its ability to climb walls and surfaces. This thing is just great at traversing, and also with its high melee stat and bleed ability, it will get through all enemy obstacles in your way, unless turrets, because these things aren't the best creatures for soaking. But if you're battling a Giga on the way, or a Rex on the way, or if you're going on a grind to get things to defeat bosses, these things will be an absolute champ for that, and they will do the job with no problems at all. Definitely in your Ark playing period, you should tame yourself a Thyla. In at number 3 is the Thyla. Now sadly, if you are on the island, you will not have access to this creature, but there is another free map where you can still get yourself a Mantis, which is Ragnarok. I always find myself coming back to one of these things, as I always miss having one. If I'm playing on the island, I'll always jump over to Ragnarok once I've got a reasonable amount of progress to tame myself one of these things to bring back with me, as these things are just so useful for harvesting things, as you can equip pretty much any melee weapon you can think of to the hands of these things. Here I have got swords, but you can use things like pickaxes, hatchets, pikes, and the list simply goes on and on. If I was to use this thing on Ragnarok, I usually use it for getting mutton, as it is a very effective sheep killer, as it has a reasonable amount of speed and it is going to do a lot of damage, and it is a lot more fun to kill things on top of a Mantis than to just kill things with your general player. These things are just really fun to ride around on and actually make harvesting quite a pleasurable thing, instead of the mundane task that every Ark player needs to do and very much doesn't look forward to. But if you are using the Mantis for bigger combat things, just watch out, as its health stat isn't really quite there for combat, but apart from that, this thing is absolutely amazing. In at number 3 is the RG. Now this is definitely one of Ark's most popular creatures, and for good reason. This thing is absolutely insane, like the Mantis, for gathering resources, namely for things like metal runs, as its saddle acts as a portable smithy, and it has weight reduction on things like metal, obsidian and crystal. And also, on top of all of that, it is an absolutely great flyer as well. In Ark, it is really a privilege to have yourself a flyer, and it is something that every player will need at some point in their Ark journey. But also, compared to something like the Pteranodon, it has a much better weight and stamina stat. So these things, in my opinion, are a lot less frustrating than something like a Pteranodon. And also, on top of that, they can pick up a lot more than a Pteranodon, and creatures that are a lot larger than what the Pteranodon can pick up. Mainly, you would pick up something like an Anki that you have tamed, and it will automatically harvest metal for you until it reaches 70% weight, and then you'll have to do it manually. But the main reason why the RG is just so good is it makes most of Ark's really mundane tasks so much simpler and just so much easier. And finally, in at number 1 is the Baryonyx. Now this is the creature in Ark that I will always come back to, and is the creature that I look forward to taming the most out of pretty much any creature in Ark. This thing is just so useful for so many things. If you were looking to tame one, you will find them in the swamp biome of pretty much any map. And then after that, they are just a very simple knockout tame, and then they will require any kind of fish or kibble to be tamed. After that, you have yourself an absolute versatile beast. These are the best creatures by far for doing any kind of cave runs, and they are filled with such a wealth of abilities, which makes this creature really special compared to any other. When the Baryonyx is in water, they have a secret ability that can stun creatures up to the size of a megalodon. On PC, you will do this by pressing C. But also, on top of that, these things are quite a good travel mount as well, as they do have a very good amount of speed, and also on top of that, they have a reasonable amount of melee damage and health, so they will get through most of the obstacles that you will find in Ark. Again, don't use these things for turret soaking, as that is not going to work, but for things even like Gigas and Argentavisuses, these things will put up a very decent fight if you have obviously a high enough level. Just maybe don't go killing Titanosaurs with this thing, as I don't know if their health would stack up. But like every good creature, it does still have its downsides. Sadly, this thing does spawn in the swamp, which is just an absolute pain. But anyway, that is going to mark the end of today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you didn't agree with this list, comment your top 5 in the comments down below. And I'll see you all later. Bye.